your memories of the Sinclair C5. And that was sadly following the death of inventor Sir Clive Sinclair. Now, we found out that the vehicle, which was considered by many to be ahead of its time, was designed here in Coventry in the 1980s at the University of Warwick Science Park. It's amazing, isn't it? I didn't even know that this time last week. Well, we tracked down somebody I'm very much looking forward to talking to, Barry Wills, who was the Managing Director of Sinclair Vehicles at the Science Park, and he's on the show today. Hello, Barry.
Good morning, Brodie. How are you?
Very, very good, sir. And thank you for coming on today, because when we were talking about this last week, I thought we need to talk about this some more. And little did I know I was going to be speaking to you.
Well, there you go. And I'm only just down the road as well. Who would have believed it?
I know, literally on the doorstep. Now, before we talk about this, we've got to talk about your past in the motoring industry, because a certain DeLorean car featured heavily in your career, didn't it?
It did. It was the highlight of my career. For 4.5 years, I was the longest-serving employee, the third and final CEO, and I saw the project from birth to death. So it was an amazing experience. I've even written a book to cover the period I was working there, called John Z. the DeLorean and Me. And I've recently published a prequel-sequel to that includes a long chapter on the Sinclair C5.
Oh, excellent.
So, yeah.
Well, you're no stranger then to the car industry, and especially infamous vehicles as well. So let's talk about. Well, that's the term, isn't it? Really,
one way of putting it.
Yes, absolutely.
I did start my career at Jaguar with the E-Type.
Oh, there you go. Not so infamous, more tremendous,
prestigious. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what position? What a position to have held. Let's rewind back to the 1980s. Then, what do you remember of that time when Sinclair came and set up base in Warwick? Because you were a massive part of this, and it's all to do with a mutual friend, wasn't it?
Well, it was, and yes, it's a sign again of how small the industry is and how you collect contacts along the way. I'd worked with a guy called Tom Caron when I was a deputy managing director of Reliant Motor Company, by the way, with the Reliant Robin.
Wow.
Tom was the guy who designed the Bond Bug and the Rally Chopper bicycle, amongst other things, the Scimitar GTE. I got a phone call from Tom during late 1982 when effectively I was putting DeLorean Motor Company to bed for the receivers, a sad task, having to fire 2,000 people along the way, but these jobs have got to be done. And Tom told me that he'd been working with a guy called Clive Sinclair on an electric vehicle. And, of course, at that time, Clive was, you picked up a newspaper, you're reading about Clive Sinclair. The Sinclair Spectrum computers were selling like hotcakes and so on. And he'd become a multimillionaire. He'd just done a private placing of Sinclair Research that raised £12 million that he apparently planned to spend on investment on an electric vehicle. And Tom told me that Clive was looking for an automotive guy with an automotive background to talk to. So, would I be interested in meeting him? Well, you don't turn down opportunities like that. So, I met up with him pretty rapidly. It took another 2 or 3 months to sort out a deal and to complete my responsibilities with DeLorean. And I started work in the early part of 1983 as managing director of effectively a new, brand new company on paper, Sinclair Vehicles Limited, operating out of an office in London next door to Clive's in central London. That wasn't going to be a place to develop a vehicle, whatever it turned out to be. So I I decided to make life convenient for me. I was living on Cannon Park in Coventry, right next door to where the Warwick Science Park was being developed. So I made contact with a guy called David Rowe, who was the guy heading up the science park at that time, basically putting it all together. And we created a situation where we could establish the company there in a brand new building, which became known as the Sinclair building. I believe it's still there, and I was delighted to see last time I looked at it that it was occupied by part of Jaguar Land Rover.
Oh, that's right up your street. That's
rather a nice touch. Yeah.
No, it is. That's your connection again, isn't it? Really. Now,
exactly.
Before we talk about that day and how you got it, in Coventry, which was and something else for us to be proud of. What was it like working with Sir Clive? Because let's face it, he was new to the car industry. We're talking about computer backgrounds, and he was a boffin as well, wasn't he, Barry? True definition of a genius, a pioneer. What was it like working with him? What was he like back then?
Oh, he's an amazing man. I mean, he was. I think he was a genius. He was inspirational. He got a tremendous sense of humour. And I very much enjoyed working for him. He was a ginger hair and of course bearded, and he had an infamous
personality.
Personality, but loss of temper.
Oh, yes, right.
He lost his temper at the slight, like most ginger-haired people, And,
controversial, yes. Barry.
Fortunately, it never happened with me because I'm quite inclined towards. I don't have ginger hair, but I'm quite inclined towards a loss of temper too. No, we got on very well indeed. I really enjoyed working with him. He was a pleasure to work for. He pretty well left me alone, and he was a model chairman, really, I guess.
And what was and because you are a legend of the motor industry, Barry. I think we've got that from talking to you, and that's why you've got your books as well for us to track down. But was there much disappointment when the C5 had so much hype? And let's be honest, it didn't take off. I mean, I was speaking to a motor expert a few days ago, and he said it was ahead of its time. What was that disappointment like?
I'm not sure it was ahead of its time. I'm not sure its time has ever come, to be honest. But it was the basic problem with the C5 was it was vulnerable, but in traffic, as a bicycle is, a bicycle. Pedestrians are vulnerable in traffic. Motor scooters are vulnerable in traffic. It was no different, but there was a guy around at that time who ran a pseudo safety organization, which sounded far more important than it was, called the British Safety Council. A guy called James Tye, who sought any opportunity to get publicity for his business, which was really all about selling courses in health and safety in industry. For instance, if the Queen was spotted riding her horse without a safety helmet on, with just as she does, with just a scarf around her head, he would write to the Daily Mail and cause a real rumpus about what about example she was setting. If she was allowing her children at that time to ride their horses without helmets on, the same thing applied. Well, the C5 was the perfect opportunity for the attention-grabbing Tye to create another kerfuffle, and that he did very, very successfully. He set a campaign to claim that the C5 was unsafe, which it wasn't. It met every bit of legislation that was required for a vehicle of that type, and more, because we actually adopted a lot of car-like legislation that wasn't necessary by law. But part of the basic problem was that I could not persuade Clive from not describing it as a car. He continually talked about his electric car when what I wanted him to talk about was a unique form of electric vehicle.
Absolutely. No, and that was the key. And I tell you what, Barry, time has sadly caught up on us, and I could have spoken to some more. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't know about that additional story at the end there. I had no idea about that. But Barry, it's been lovely to talk to you, my friend, and been really great to get to know you and hear a little bit more about the history of your work with Sir Clive Sinclair, and of course the let's use the term, the infamous C5 as well. Thank you so much for joining us on BBC CWR. And if you were listening to the show last week, we actually found someone who had a C5 who actually drove on the ring road. Did you hear that last week? Now stay there. We've got Madonna and La Isla Bonita for you next. Thank you so much, Barry.